for February 25th, 2019. If all members could please press their attend buttons and silence any cell phones. Now, before standing today, I'd ask that we modify the agenda just slightly today. Typically, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation, which we will do tonight, but I'd ask to modify it to observe a moment of silence. For those of you who may not know, former Supervisor Bernie Egan passed away recently on January 31st. Supervisor Egan was a county board supervisor for 14 years, from 1994 to 2008, at which time our current vice chairman took that position. During that time frame, he also served as chairman of the Highways Committee and chairman of the Facilities Committee. He also served as chairman of the town of Utica. Now, I had the opportunity to serve with Supervisor Egan because he was a supervisor during my first 2 years here on the board. And what I can tell you is I always appreciated the wisdom of his words. He was the type of individual that when he spoke, people listened. It seems to run in the family. And so tonight, I would like to offer a moment of silence in recognition of the service and passing of Supervisor Egan. I'd ask that we do that after our invocation tonight. So if you could please all join me in standing first, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation, and then a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the invocation by Supervisor Locke.
We come to you asking for your blessings and help as we are gathered together this evening. Show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Locke. And now if you all could please join me in remaining standing and bow your heads for a moment of silence in recognition of the service and passing of Supervisor Bernie Egan. Thank you, and please be seated. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of this evening's agenda. I will call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move for the adoption of tonight's agenda with two changes. I'd like to put the zoning report and the resolutions right after the chairman's report.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. So just to be clear, we'll have the zoning reports and then the resolutions 106 through 111 prior to the first presentation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to that time in the agenda in which we allow an opportunity from anyone from the public to speak on anything on the agenda this evening or any issue under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone who wishes to speak tonight? Please, if you could please go ahead and step to the mic and give your name and address for the record. Either one.
My name is Cindy Otto. I live in Neenah. Do I need to give you a specific address?
If you could give, yes, your address, please.
536 Elm Street in Neenah.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Cindy Otto. I'm an advocate for mental health, and I'm here to speak about the mental health diversion program, which I believe is being discussed this evening. I'm definitely in support of such a program. However, I believe there are some very important pieces that need to be included prior to startup. There are too many stories of people who fell through the cracks because their diagnosis was misunderstood by people who are not experts. This includes my own personal experience, which led to the loss of my son. I have spoken with numerous mental health diversion programs throughout the country, and each one has told me they have side-by-side relationships with mental health experts during initial police contact. I was told of a story of a young woman who was tased by law enforcement 4 times and sent to jail. She struggled with schizophrenia, bipolar, and depression. There was a week-long delay in offering her services. She became agitated, and in an effort to regain control, officers used a stun gun once again, and shortly after she passed away. Many who try to cope during this lapse in time prior to getting help for a mental health condition often deteriorate rapidly or end up in a jail cell where they are often taken. The county, in this case, created a diversion program after the passing of this young lady. The first responders, alongside those who work in crisis, have significant training, help direct the person to the next step so there is not a lapse in time and they are not sent to jail. I also worked with a program in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where they built a support system prior to starting their diversion program so that there were opportunities available for people with mental health conditions as well as AODA conditions to step right into some type of a program upon arrest or any significant police calls. I also believe it's crucial to have doctors and therapists on board in pre-planning to any program prior to the program startup. It's my understanding that the determination with respect to the placement into a diversion program in Winnebago County occurs after the person fills out a personal assessment. This person then waits until everything is evaluated, and then a few months or weeks down the road, the plan of action begins. If I were having a heart attack and I had to fill out an assessment to determine whether or not I get help and I could die in the process, I could die in the process. I am also not an expert in symptoms that are relevant in determining a heart condition and could not wait weeks or months for help. Only a cardiac expert could make those decisions. A mental diagnosis is a mental health condition and needs to be viewed like any other medical condition. Oftentimes, people with a mental health condition cannot advocate for themselves or do not want to advocate for themselves because they may have given up. They may also be in a situation where they don't believe they deserve help, which is quite common, especially among males. Once someone with a mental health condition is placed into a jail cell, it can escalate their situation and inhibit their ability to stabilize. I'm here to speak for the voiceless and those who no longer have a chance to speak up. My son was someone who no one would have guessed had a mental health diagnosis of depression, anxiety, panic, and PTSD due to trauma. He graduated with honors, volunteered in a third world country where he taught important skills to others, was passionate about life, a good athlete, and a strong Christian. He was not always taken seriously when he talked openly about his diagnosis because he did not fit into the typical description of what most people believe those with a mental health diagnosis should look like. With that being said, I'd like to close in reading you a text message from my son shortly before I lost him. Thank you for never giving up on me, Mom. I hate this feeling so much, and I wish others could just understand what it's like. I promised my son I would make sure others do understand, and I strongly support the diversion program that will be presented tonight. I just ask that before we proceed with it, if it's even in that situation, we consider the time lapse between someone either being arrested or coming forward willingly and actually getting that help. We can't wait a day, we can't wait 2 days, we can't wait a week. We need to have a plan intact before this program starts up, and we need to have a good relationship with mental health care providers so that we go from A to B immediately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments and for speaking tonight. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Are you voting on the Town of Algoma ordinance?
If you, please,
Are you voting on the Town of Algoma ordinances tonight? Or do we talk about that now or later? This is new to me.
you can talk about that now at the mic, yes.
Okay. Basically, this is in regard of the Town of Algoma zoning changes for the new subdivision. This is not about not in my backyard mentality. This is not about how someone thinks that the duplex the developer built in Appleton looked nice, or that we need duplexes to sustain the town's growth. This is not about how some think that small lots would be great for retired people that don't want to deal with large yachts. This is about the Town of Algoma developing in a way that matches with its identity. This is identified through its comprehensive plan, ordinances, and even its slogan of progressive rural community. The development plan does not follow the town's comprehensive plan that has identified the future use of this land as low density. Even Mark Thompson of the Town of Algoma Zoning Committee noted that the property was to be single family and all the duplexes were supposed to be along the Highway 21 corridor. If you look at the comprehensive map, you can see that all areas that currently have duplexes, they're marked in red and are identified as medium density. This makes sense considering even while maintaining the town's minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet, you're able to double the population density by building duplexes. The town has gone so far to get this passed that they want the County of Winnebago to change the wording of its land use resolution from R3 medium density to R3 low density. Besides the development not following our comprehensive plan, it is also not following our zoning ordinances. About a third of the properties in the subdivision are requiring at least one variance, and many require several. Everything from minimum lot size, minimum lot width, reduced setback lines, more properties on cul-de-sac roads, and others. Many of the deviations are not small. According to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, a zoning board abuses its powers if it routinely grants zoning variance requests. Variance requests are to be granted only in limited circumstances and only when the applicant provides evidence that provides they have met all of the legal criteria for required variances. The three main criteria that a variant application must satisfy are unnecessary hardship, a unique property condition, and no harm to the public interest. An area variance applicant must show the compliance with the strict letter of the restrictions governing area. Setback, frontage, height, bulk, and density would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted use, or would render the conformity with such restrictions unnecessarily burdensome. It is not enough that the area variant applicant shows the zoning regulations prevent or burdens this planning activity. They must show by competent evidence that the regulations unreasonably prevent and necessarily burden the activity. All variance applicants must also show that the alleged unnecessary hardship is due to a unique property condition. If a variance application fails to prove the existence of a unique property condition, the connection between the condition and the hardship, even if the hardship is great, a zoning board has no power to grant the requested variation. Finally, all variant request applicants must show that the request variance will not be contrary to the public interest. At no time during this process has a developer met the criteria for allowing zoning variances. The property is currently an empty field that is zoned for agriculture. This should be a clean slate for any developer, and they should have no problem designing it to meet the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances of the town and county. With over 250 members of the community signing a petition against the property being developed in a way not consistent with the surrounding area, comprehensive plan or zoning ordinances, I think you can see that this is against public interest. With this, I am asking that you vote against the zoning changes to R3 for the area and to decline all variance requests to this development. Thank you.
Sir, if you could please state your name
I'm
and
sorry.
address for the
Yes.
record. That's quite all right.
Jeff Selkert, 3939 Leonard Point Road.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on any item on the agenda tonight or anything under county jurisdiction? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? And if you could please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Susan Clark. I own a home at 3686 Leonard's Point Road. I reside right now in Madison at 1122 Deborah Lane, but hope to move here one of these days soon. I want to thank you all for being here. It always brings me a sense of awe being in this building because my great-great-grandfather's home was built on this, where we are right now, which was claimed for public use, torn down, and the courthouse was built. So the only legacy that's left from my great-great-grandfather are the oak trees out front, but it always gives me a sense of shadows of forgotten ancestors, so I'm kind of glad to be here. I wouldn't be standing here if not for my great-great-grandfather for obvious reasons, but if the AF groups, as Jeff was alluding to or talking about, if their proposed request for zoning changes to R3 were in accordance with the town of Algoma's established minimum lot sizes within our own, I'm sorry, I'm not as eloquent as Jeff, with what the town has already established. I'm concerned not about the development, but about the number of houses that are going into that development and the impermeable surfaces that that is going to create primarily. As you know, when you put more houses in a smaller area, you have more water runoff. What I have seen over my lifetime is a gradual, and then in the last 5 years, a dramatic increase in the water quality of Lake Butamore. So much so that this past summer, there were many, many days I was unable to safely use the lake because of the blue-green algae. Also, we have observed around the state the flooding that is occurring over areas that have been overdeveloped around our waterways, which has created a significant burden in terms of property damage and also even loss of life. Finally, my concern, in addition to what Jeff has already said, is the problems on Highway 21 and Leonards Point Road, which will increase, particularly during the commuter hours, because of the increased traffic by the number of lots or number of homes that are being proposed in this area. So that is all I have to say. It's a lot, too much. I'm sorry I've rambled a little bit, but I thank you for your time, and I just ask you to think about what these changes are going to mean, not only for us today, but for our children, our grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren, and generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? I'll say one final time, is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? Then we'll close that portion of the agenda, and we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is correspondence, zoning petitions, and notice of claims. I'll call on the county clerk.
First, I want to make note on everyone's desks are copies of two emails from citizens that are responding or expressing their concerns about zoning report 001 and the mandatory ordinance. Instead of reading it into the record for saving of time, we just gave everybody a copy. So just so you know, we'll note that for the record. We do have a petition for a zoning petition from the towns of Algoma, Nakaimai, Amro, and Utica for rezoning from Sawyer Creek floodplain to revised Sawyer Creek floodplain zoning district. That's referred to the Planning and Zoning Committee. We have notices of claim, one from the Wisconsin Public Service for damage and loss of electrical service caused by a highway department vehicle striking their equipment, referred to Personnel and Finance. A notice of claim from CRW Insurance on behalf of Tim Lund for damage to his vehicle caused by an accident with a county highway vehicle. That's also referred to P&F, Personnel and Finance Committee. And a notice of claim from Jim Leaders for damage to his vehicle caused by a Winnebago County Highway Department snowplow, also referred to Personnel and Finance. That's all.
Thank you, Clerk Ertmer. Next item on the agenda is reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any commissions or boards? I will call on Supervisor Lautenschlager, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity to, with several other supervisors, on February 5th and 6th to go to the Wisconsin Counties Association Legislative Exchange in Madison. And this year, I thought it was very informative. One of the better ones that I attended. Of course, we had the governor there, the new governor, Tony Evers, and he introduced his new cabinet. So we got to listen to a few words from every one of his secretaries along the way. Another special guest was former Governor Tommy Thompson. He wrote a book, so he had a book signing, and he talked about his years as governor and how his tributes with him being a Republican governor and having a whole Democratic legislation, and how he had to work together with them to find some common ground in it. We also, every year, we have a roundtable discussion that included Speaker Robin Voss from the Assembly, Minority Leader Gordon Hintz from the Assembly, and Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald, and Minority Leader Jennifer Schillings from the Senate. And they were asked several questions on what's this session's agenda is for both the Assembly and the Senate. And it was kind of interesting with their comments this time around. It's kind of like, well, this isn't what the Republicans want to do, or this is what Democrats want to do. It's kind of like, we're going to kind of wait and see. I mean, it's kind of with having a Democratic governor and a Republican legislative and Senate, it's kind of like neither side really wanted to dig in and get anything, but it was just kind of we're just going to wait and see how things go. One of the key speakers in this conference was Mark Tauscher from the Green Bay Packers, and it was interesting listening to his story and how he came up the ranks. And actually, Mark Tauscher started out. He played in high school basketball through high school. Didn't really start football until his senior year, and then talked about his senior year and then into some of his college years, and how he actually was going to give up on football, but he had coaches that urged him to stay in. Like we know what happened is, he played several years for the Green Bay Packers and was a very good offensive lineman. And then closing, it was always, we always have a discussion between former State Majority Leader Chuck Koala and the former Assembly Speaker Scott Jensen, and they kind of talk about what they think the future is for this legislation. It's kind of a humorous thing, and it's very interesting to see. But I thought this year was very, very interesting. One of the main things is our Executive Director Mark O'Connell did a series on predicting the future. And it's interesting where he went back like 100 years or whatever, where people predicting this thing was going to happen, and talk about one day you'll be able to talk to people, see them on the TV and stuff like this, and all this stuff came true. I mean, so far, so it was an interesting segment out on things years and years past where people predicted this is what's going to happen. And so far, a lot of these inventions and stuff like this have come about. So I was glad that I was able to go, and I thought it was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had legislative meeting this morning, which was a large turnout of the board. And again, I want to thank all the board members that were there coming out on the roads and that. We had other people, we had townspeople that were there. So it was really a nice turnout, all except of our legislators. Of course, the biggest thing would have been the sex offender. And there's quite a long story on that. I'm not going to go into it a lot, just saying that we thought it was resolved one way and it might not be. And so there will be another meeting for sure on March 25th. And definitely that sex offender will be on there, and hopefully Michael Schra will be there. He was the chairman of the committee that should have been there, but he was homesick. I wasn't sure if he is snowed in or what, because also I heard that the city of Oshkosh had their legislative meeting this morning. And I know Mr. Hintz was supposed to be there too, and he wasn't there. So, but Mr. Schra did go ahead. He called into the clerk's office and told him that he's sick. So we will plan on March 25th. But like I said, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of good discussion. And I just want to say I appreciate you all coming, and mark your calendars for March 25th that there will be one.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to report on the Winnebago County Drug Court commencement, January 31st. On Thursday, January 31st, the Safe Streets Initiative held a drug court commencement for 3 drug court graduates in Branch 4 courtroom. At the ceremony, individual stories were told and statistics of their fulfilled requirements shared. One graduate participating in the program for 2 years attended 54 court sessions, took 441 drug tests, attended 290 meetings, and did 123 and a half hours of community service. As you can surmise, not only is this an individual feat, but you have to remember all the Winnebago County team professionals involved in this process. The drug court was started in Winnebago County January 1st, 2006. The second item I'd like to report on is the Safe Streets Initiative Committee report from January 18th. The Safe Streets Initiative was established in 2005. It has been designated the Winnebago County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. It is both an intra departmental, and an intergovernmental committee representing the primary stakeholders in Winnebago County Public Safety. Chaired by Judge Karen Seifert, principal members include the Sheriff, District Attorney, Public Defender, Human Services, Behavioral Division Director, local state parole officer, local police chiefs, state assemblyman, and UW Oshkosh criminal justice professor, and elected county officials and jurists. On Friday, January 18th, the committee heard District Attorney Christian Gossert review his perspective on a proposed mental health court for Winnebago County. The consensus was to have the special committee studying the proposed mental health court meet one more time to assimilate the DA's perspective before making a recommendation. Ongoing programs include drug court, Safe Streets Treatment Options Program, 24/7 alcohol and drug programs, domestic violence diversion program, misdemeanor drug diversion program, DA prostitution diversion program, Oshkosh Police Step-Up Program, Department of Human Services Diversion and Teen Court, and the Good Choices Program. There are new programs that have been initiated by the district attorney, and they include failure to pay child support diversion program, post-charge drug diversion program, UW Oshkosh drug diversion program, pre- and post-charge healthy interactions group diversion, formerly the family violence diversion program, pre- and post-charge general felony or misdemeanor diversion program, post-charge overdose diversion program, driver's license recovery diversion program, and worthless check diversion program. The committee heard from Wisconsin Assemblyman Michael Schrod, who chairs the Adult Corrections Committee, share the concern of our populous prisons and how it appears there is little legislative support to abandon the truth in sentencing law, which restricts local judges' discretion in sentencing violators. This has contributed to our large prison population. Some of the disparity in the lower Minnesota prison count, which was discussed, can be attributed to their larger number of county jail prisoners. Assemblyman Schra believes a key way to reduce state prison population numbers would be to have a structured release with support services upon release to reduce recidivism. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give my report on the legislative exchange in Madison I attended earlier this month. A couple of things other than Supervisor Lawrence reported on. After Mark O'Connell, the executive director, gave his Predicting the Future presentation, he introduced us to a one Dale Canop, who is heading up a new division, a new thing for the WCA, Director of Research and Analytics. And what they will be rolling out in the next few months is a website called Forward Analytics, which you can look into any kind of statistics or anything, put it in your county, and you'll get a map and statistics. Like I say, they'll be announcing it more in the WCA magazine, because when we tried it at the conference, the website would not come up, but they said it was coming up. Next, something that might be more of an interest to our IS committee is a presentation of digital counties and artificial intelligence. We heard from someone from Advanced I, Wisconsin, who I guess they had a project that included 13 counties, and Brown County more prominently, with their county executive and their employees, to how to engage the impending AI phenomenon that's going to come to our counties in the next few years. And lastly, I wanted to just remind people, if you missed the legislative exchange, that there will be regional legislative meetings. Ours, East Central Wisconsin, will be held on Thursday, March 14th, 2019, 9 a.m. to noon at the Red Line Hotel, Paper Valley. By then, the governor's budget will be out. They also go through all the legislative proposals, which I can give to anyone that we all picked up at the conference. So that's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to speak just briefly, I think, on the legislative conference that we went to dovetail on my two colleagues' discussion there. First of all, Tommy Thompson said something that really I thought was cute. He said his father told him one time that he was blessed with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and if he used them in those percentages, he'd get along really fine. So I thought that would be pretty good. The second, when Larry talked about Mark Tauscher, I happened to be in the barn down in Madison the day that his number one ranked basketball team got beat by a little school from Oostburg. Of course, I was rooting for Oostburg, and we kind of figured that they were going to win as soon as we walked in the door, but that's beside the point. I was impressed by a big guy like Tauscher, and he had twinkle toes. I mean, that guy could really move and get around a basketball court for as big as he was. I was really impressed. I knew he was going to go places. Third, Mike Norton reminded me in the evening on the 5th that Mary Kohler, who is our new Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs chairman, was in the room, so I had a chance to renew my acquaintance with her. I've known her for about 5 years. She used to be on the Dane County Board and the head of the Dane County Veterans Service Commission. And she didn't have one of her cards on her, but she said she'd get back in touch with me really soon with all her contact information, and she made good on that. Within 6 hours, I had an email in my inbox. Lastly, I just want to report that I have been asked by Cindy Bobbitt, who's the chairman of the NACO Midwest Central Region Caucus. I've been asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance at our caucus on Monday, March 4th at 7:30 a.m. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Seeing one other call-on, I'll call on Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also attended the Legislative Committee, but I'm not going to speak on that because they've done a great job. What I want to say, though, is I want to applaud Sheriff John Motz and all of his officers, deputies, for their quick response on Sunday after the 131-car pileup on Highway 41. It was really bad weather that day if you were out at all in that morning. And I just want to applaud their work because they opened up the highway as quickly as they could, and there was just one fatality. And I think it certainly could have been worse. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. I was going to actually do it as well, Sheriff Motz, but certainly thank you to you and all the Sheriff's Department who was involved. Much appreciated. I would agree. So seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and close that item of the agenda and move on to the next item, which is the approval of the proceedings from January 8th, 2019 and January 15th, 2019. Is there a motion? There's a motion and a second. Any changes, discussion? We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next item, which is the county executive's report. Wanted to let you know that the county executive could not be here today. He had a prior commitment that he had already committed to, and as you all know, this was a change in our prior schedule. However, he did have one appointment, and that is for the Winnebago County Housing Authority, recommending Jesse Coates. I'd entertain a motion for that appointment. There's a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? And we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the county board chairman's report. So first, wanted to let you know that Supervisors Finch, Supervisor Gabbard, and Supervisor Robel asked to be excused tonight. I did also wanted to thank you all for accommodating the change in the schedule. It's unusual, obviously, for us to have a meeting on a Monday, but it was unusual circumstances. Certainly greatly appreciate all your efforts for attending here tonight. Also, just a couple other quick updates. Wanted to let you know, as you know, we have a vacancy in District 14. That was former Supervisor Wallen's district, and then a vacancy in District 9. That's former Supervisor Hogan's district. So first, in District 9, wanted to let you know that we have made a posting, however, we have not had any current applicants. So wanted to make you aware that we will, or we are in the process of reposting for that district. For District 14, we've actually had 3 candidates. I've interacted with all 3 of them, met 2 of them individually, and working to meet the 3rd one as well. The plan would be that there would be a recommendation for an appointment for our March 19th meeting, which would mean that you would see that on our agenda by March 12th or earlier. And then also wanted to let you know, we did have a couple updates that wanted to provide in regards to, one, as Vice Chairman Egan was referring to, in regards to placement of sex offenders, as well as in regards to update pertaining to county executive authority. So I had asked the Corporation Counsel if she could provide an update, so I will defer to her so she can provide a brief update in regards to each of those topics. Corporation Counsel?
Thank you. In regard to the issue with 980s and the sex offenders, we had a evidentiary hearing, actually in this very courtroom, at the end of January, where testimony was heard from the state as well as from Sheriff Motz. And the court took the matter under advisement. And the good news is that it issued a decision dated January 30th. And the portion that I was most concerned about indicated, and I quote, Winnebago County identified a residential option on County Y to build a site for a mobile home for a residence for the defendant, and Winnebago County has fulfilled its obligation under Wisconsin Statute 980. And it went on to talk about the fact that the county's efforts here have been commendable. So that is very good news for the county. What the court decided after hearing testimony was there were 2 locations, one out of the city and one on County Y, as you all knew. And the court had decided that the option outside of the city would be the better way to go. There is a postscript to that. I heard from the vendor. Vendors are people who go off and buy homes and then enter into contracts with the state to provide housing. And the vendor who was looking at this property outside of the city called my office, called me, and said, I just wanted to let you know that I am not closing on that residence outside of the city because it failed inspection. So at this point in time, again, we have a court order saying Winnebago County has satisfied its obligations, and I have basically, I had a phone call from the vendor indicating that, by the way, even though the judge indicated we were going to be looking at this spot outside of the city, this vendor was not purchasing that property because it failed inspection. Now, does it mean that the state got another vendor who will purchase this property? I don't know. I have not heard anything from the state, nor has Sheriff Motz. There is going to be a meeting at the end of this week with Sheriff Motz and the state, and hopefully we can get some clarification. But the good news, again, is we are not facing that $400,000 penalty based on this January 30th order. I should also note, too, Supervisor Egan, Vice Chairman Egan, that when I got back from the Legislative Committee meeting, there was a message from Gordon Hintz's office indicating that they are sorry, but their meeting with the city overlapped our meeting, and they were not going to be able to attend it. So that came in at 11:15 this morning. I think they actually sent it in at about 8:15, but obviously I was at the Legislative Committee. So that's that. So that's where things stand with 980. And we can certainly keep you up to date because, as I've told people, this is like an onion. There are layers after layers, and it changes from day to day. Regarding the question of county executive authority, I think what might be best is for me to read an email that I sent to Andy Phillips and his response, so that you might have an idea as to basically what we were talking about. So I said, and this was sent on January 8th. Good morning, Andy. Following our phone conversation in late November, I had forwarded an email asking questions concerning the powers of the county executive and the county board, and specifically whether the county executive was required to follow through on county board action. As we discussed during our phone call, this begged the question as to whether the proposed action was executable and well-defined. If the action was executable and well-defined, this begged the question as to whether the county executive was forced to spend every dollar allocated in a budget. Per the example you raised during our conversation, if a county board set aside money to purchase 7 patrol cars and only 6 patrol cars were purchased, would this action suggest the county executive exceeded his authority? I think not, as does my predecessor. I have attached an email I just received from the county board chair asking for a status update, which the county board chair, Ramos, sent to me, and I included it in this email. The question that is on many members' minds is whether the county executive is required by statute to follow through on an amendment adopted during the 2017 budget session, before my time, for the 2018 budget, and spend every dollar allocated in the 2018 budget for demolishing a portion of an airport terminal building and fixing a roof. If the county executive does not spend in every dollar in the budget, the next question posed is whether the board can pass a resolution requiring the county executive to follow through on the amendment. I believe it cannot, based on the powers of the county executive outlined in the statute. The other question that comes to mind is, given the fact that we are beyond 2018, is this a moot question? I am fairly confident this question will come up again in a different form, and I know you're very busy, but whatever insight you can lend is appreciated. So his response to me came on January 20th, and he said, "Hi, Mary Ann. This is now twice that I've let my response be delayed. My apologies. As we discussed in November, the analysis of board versus executive power is complex, and the statutes do not contain any great level of detail about the delineation. Frankly, I don't know that the statutes are capable of being specific in this regard. You are correct that we discussed that there are degrees of compliance with a board policy, and that a lack of 100% compliance does not necessarily lead to the conclusion that there has been an overstep of executive authority. In cases involving allegations that a county board has infringed upon the powers of a county constitutional officer by failing to appropriate sufficient sums for the officer, for example, courts have found that such an intrusion is unacceptable only if the appropriation frustrates the purpose of the officer's duties. In other words, there is no requirement under the law that a constitutional officer receive the entire budgetary appropriation that the officer seeks. In the examples that you cite and that we discussed, there are a number of practical issues that impede the county executive's execution of the policy to demolish the airport building. I don't have enough information to make any sort of determination as to the merits of those practical issues. However, assuming those practical issues to be true, the law generally recognizes that there is discretion for the executive to exercise in carrying out a policy directive. As a result, the executive would not be in violation of any sort of law or statute by not completing the policy or otherwise not spending the money appropriated for such policy. On the other hand, if the issue were simply a disagreement between the board and executive as to whether the airport building should be retained or demolished, the board can make a policy decision about demolishing, and the executive would be required to follow that policy decision. I'm hoping that this email is specific enough for your purposes and for the purpose of sharing with your board and executive. Questions surrounding board and executive authority are never easy and are typically not capable of easy resolution. If there's anything I can do to assist in terms of talking further with you or your board, please do not hesitate to let me know. I have tried to get through to Mr. Phillips because I wanted to follow through on some of what he indicated, and I have not reached him, and I'm hoping by next month I'll be able to follow through. But that, at least we did get a response.
Thank you. I also want to thank the Corporation Counsel. She's ill tonight in case you can't notice, and she certainly made the effort to come tonight to give us the update. And that's the reason we have adjusted the schedule, because she wanted to be here for the voting measures tonight. So certainly appreciate her efforts to be here tonight. I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mary Ann. That is, in one part of the emails, you said it was referred to as spend every dollar. But this issue that we're speaking about from October of 2017, he hasn't spent $1. Is there a difference? None at all. It doesn't matter spending every dollar, buying 6 instead of 7 or 7 instead of 6, whatever.
Well, he
The
also.
difference.
Yeah, and I know. He talks about there's a discretion, the law generally recognizes there's a discretion for the executive to exercise in carrying out a policy directive. So, I mean, an argument can be made, that's what has been happening.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. And just so you're clear, she was referring to, we've asked for clarification, and I've asked for clarification in some of that email, because there's a bit of inconsistency, which you've probably recognized in it, so we're trying to get some clarification on that as well. Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Okay, so moving on, and just to remind everyone, we did amend the agenda, so the next items on the agenda would be the zoning reports and ordinances, followed by the resolutions, and then we will move to the presentation section. So we'll move right down to zoning reports and ordinances, and the first one is report number 001, AF Group LLC, Town of Algoma. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of report number 1.
There's a motion and a second for approval of report number 1. I will call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll direct my question to the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Committee. As I'm reading this report, the copy I have does not indicate whether this zoning change complies with their land use plan. Could you address that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, this has no problem with the county's plan whatsoever. Some of them didn't read it, what they have rewritten now, there is no problem with it. We've gone ahead, we've studied it, we've listened to everything that was brought forward to us. We've had, the people that were there to speak that night didn't say a word to us. There was no problem the night of our regular meeting also. So, and as far as what was said about the signatures that was given to us, they weren't given to us. They were presented to the town. I'm sorry, to the town. We do have a copy of them, but they were actually addressed to the town, and there is no problem with it whatsoever in the county.
And the committee vote was?
4-0. There was one missing, 401.
So the document does not reference the plan. You're saying, as a matter of record, that it does comply with the Town of Algoma plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Powers.
Sorry, my mic is a little. Is this the time where I address my concerns with this?
You certainly can.
I did want to, when I looked at this and I looked at the map and the density with the 89 properties on this property, and I know it was a farm field before, this land slopes down towards the lake, and I know that Land and Water Conservation has been working very hard on maintaining better water quality in Lake Butamore. This, with the amount of impermeable surfaces, thank you so much to our friend back here, that they, with the density of these properties, I have a big problem with this, because all of that runoff will run down towards the lake. I know I read something, or I heard something, that they're planning on having a retention pond. I think if they reduce the density of the properties, it might be acceptable, but as it is right now, it's horrendous, especially being this close to the lake. So I am strongly recommending not to vote for this.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. And just to clarify, I told her, she asked if, in regards to concerns, this first vote is technically on the report, and then the next vote would actually be on the actual rezoning. So next speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so you're saying this is not the time to express a concern about it?
I just wanted to make sure people knew that technically this is, the first vote is on the report. The actual action for rezoning, approval, or denial is the second one in regards to the mandatory ordinance.
Okay, then I'll wait.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Warnke.
I will also wait.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that one of our fellow supervisors is from the town of Algoma and has a position of responsibility with the town of Algoma. So I would like to call upon that supervisor to present the town of Algoma's position and defend that community's action to obtain the consent of the county board. And with that, I would ask that Supervisor Joel Rasmussen address the issue. I believe he is also chairman of the town of Algoma. Is
Thank
that
you,
correct?
Supervisor Eisman. It's Supervisor Rasmussen's determination to speak or not speak. Supervisor Rasmussen?
I planned on speaking, but I was waiting till the other part of it also, but
And that makes sense.
whenever you feel it's,
Why don't we go
certainly
ahead and
prepared
hold that
to speak
until
on it.
the next vote? So we'll have Supervisor Rasmussen speak when we're actually voting on the mandatory ordinance. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
I guess my question is for the chairman, Supervisor Egan. Supervisor Gordon's questions or concerns were about water quality. In matters like this, would Land and Water or anyone like that look into it and take that into account of the development? Do they do that at all for any type of these developments? And if not, that's my simple question.
Yes, Land and Water takes care of this. They cannot go ahead and put more water, dirty water, and they'll be watched very closely. And in case some of you don't know, there is a road that goes between that and the lake also. I don't know how many of you went out and looked at this, but you should have went out and looked at this property before you were voting on this, because there's quite a bit there. And this was a farm at one time, but there's a lot of houses out there now. I don't know why all of them come in there. So that whole thing has been developed, and so there's just this one piece left. There's a beautiful park there that they've got for this. There's everything you can ask for, and this just an addition onto this. And we had a lot of questions too, and a lot of it, but it seemed like the people that were there that night, even though some come up afterwards, I'm going to tell you this now, that were there that were against it, never spoke against it, and they come up afterwards and they said, we got all of our answers already taken care of. So they were pleased with the ones that were there that night.
Thank you for your comments, Vice Chairman Egan, and thank you, Supervisor Norton. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll do a voice vote on the motion and a second for approval of the report, number 001. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So now we're moving down to imaginary ordinance, number 020119, which is the actual motion for rezoning to R2/R3 for tax parcel numbers 002-0028-19-05 and 002-0030. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for amendatory ordinance number 020119.
There's a motion and a second, and please proceed, Supervisor Rasmussen. Excuse me?
I would request that this be a recorded vote.
Yes, we will allow you to speak. First speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen. And we will do a recorded vote when we
Thank you.
vote on this. Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. So please proceed, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Okay, we heard a lot of things here tonight, and please bear with me here. This is something that came to us about 9 months ago. This is not something that was taken lightly. Developer came in and the basic map that you all have there, but he also had apartments on there. And it was just a proposal, just an idea that he came in. And that was immediately rejected. Doesn't fit the land use plan. There was just no appetite for it. They pulled that off of there. But because he came in and said that with the apartments, it started a firestorm, and that genie is out of the bottle. The apartments are gone. I'll go to the petition. The petition came to the town. The petition, I don't have it in front of me, but basically said that the undersigned residents of the town do not want apartments. That's not in it. And they want it to be zoned R1. R1 zoning is large rural unsewered lots. We have a sanitary district. This has got sewer and water, so it does not fit into R1. So the petition, apartments in R1, is not applicable. We got a number of talking points here of the things that I heard. The rural atmosphere was brought up, that the sign out there says we have a rural progressive town. That sign's been there as long as I've been there, over 40 years. Our town isn't rural anymore. Our town is urban, and anybody that knows that, you can see that. When I moved out there 40 years ago, there was probably a dozen farms in that area of the town. I lived across from a hayfield. One by one, every one of those farms has been developed. And this is the only farm left in that part of the town. That family has been there, I think it's 137 years. The Jones farm, Mr. Jones passed away a while back. They don't farm it anymore, they rent it out. Like all the other parts of it, or all the other farms, they have a right to do this. When we, as the town board and the planning commission, discussed this, like I say, we put a lot of thought into this over 9 months. State statute 236.13.5 says the approving authority cannot be arbitrary, unreasonable, or discriminatory. And those are the things that we had to go by. One of the speakers said it wasn't about my backyard, but this is a lot of emotion and a lot of not in my backyard. We don't, as a town board, we could not do that. I had emails, part of this development is a condo association and standalone condos. Which are mostly going to be retired people. I had emails telling me we only want young people out here. I believe that's discriminatory. We have, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to go to the duplexes. When the departments were taken out, then the focus was on the duplexes. We have duplexes scattered around our town. I went to every duplex this last fall, sat in front of it, looked at it, talked to people that live around the duplexes. I never heard one negative comment from anybody in the township about the duplexes that we have. These duplexes that are being proposed are they're for a buffer along the park, as you can see on the map. They're going to be high-end duplexes. We've seen pictures. They're going to have regulations on what they have to be. We have a development around the corner off of Leonard's Point Road, about a mile away or so, maybe a little more than that. That is a condo, and it's an R3 area. There are duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes being built in there as we speak. For these other developments to have been allowed in the town, and then we just come along and say this one isn't, I believe that under my three headings there would be arbitrary. When these other duplexes that are being built, I talk to people around there. Do you have any problem with these? And through this whole process, not one comment was made about those duplexes being built a mile down the road. This is about my backyard. I heard a comment about the traffic, and that's true. Leonard's Point Road is an old road. We'd love to reconstruct it. We have a $2 million budget, $2.4 million, and to do a $6 million road, that's pretty difficult. The problem there is the intersection at 21, if you're aware of that. When the 21 bypass was built, it's never been a good intersection. There's been accidents there. We know it needs to be done, but that's a state road. The state has been doing a 21 corridor study for a number of years on that. They were going to do a interchange there at one point. Well, that didn't work out. It never would have worked. Now they're talking about roundabouts, which is what it needs to have. The state told us a while back, we'll put the roundabout in if you want to pay for it. Well, we don't have $2 million to pay for it. The second criteria is if we do a project. We have a grant for Almer Road, which comes right out to that intersection. We hope to tie in something with that. The other criteria is a bad accident, and we certainly hope that that never happens. But our administrator and I met with our state senator last week, talked about this. We're meeting with the DOT, I believe, next week. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be meeting with our state assemblyman in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about this. Excuse me, please. So we know that that's a problem there. Leonard's Point Road has been an old road while all these other developments have been put in there. And yes, we're aware of that, but that's not a reason to deny the last farm there and to deny the Jones family the ability to develop their land. Density, we'll talk about that. Part of that is that it was called a planned development district. It's not really that, but it's close to it. It's an area with smaller lots and smaller standalone condos. Those are very popular right now. Our land comprehensive plan was done, or this land thing was done probably 20 years ago. Things have changed a lot in 20 years. We have two big generations that have changed dramatically. My generation, the baby boomers, are moving into condos. We have the millennials we didn't have 20 years ago, want smaller homes. Part of the problem with, or the issue with traffic on Leonard's Point Road, if this area goes in that we made a variance for these smaller lots, retired people are not going to be out there most likely during rush hour. That's when the traffic problem is. I've gone to Leonard's Point Road at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, gone for all 4 miles and never saw a car on there. It's during rush hour, and we know that. The density there, the Jones farm sold, the Jones family sold the town 10 acres for the Jones Park. We got that built last fall, a few things to do yet. We're really proud of it. I would encourage you to go out there and check it out. Bring your sled along. We have a nice sledding hill on it. But if the Jones family would have chosen to develop their whole farm, put it into the 15,000 square foot lots that our land code says, they could have actually put in 27 more homes than what is being proposed in this plan. So the density is a little dense in areas, but as a whole, it is not as dense as it could be. Drainage was brought up, and Vice Chair Egan addressed that a little bit. This is a farm right now. It's rented out. They could go out there and spread cow manure, and that would run right into the lake. There is no drainage or detention ponds. There's no water quality. There's nothing out there. This plan, if you look on your map, you'll see 2 detention ponds. That's for water quality. They've overdone it. They've had their engineers do it. If this gets approved, the county's engineers will be looking at this for drainage. Then the town will have another independent engineer looking at this and make sure they've overdone it so that there's going to be less water exiting this development than there is currently with just a farm field. And I'm confident that that's going to work out. And it will be water quality. So the issue on water quality and amount of water is going to be better than what it is now. I think I've covered most everything everybody talked about. I guess if there's more questions, I can come back to it. But there's one thing that, to this whole thing, if you look on your map at the road names on there, and I didn't realize this till just a few weeks ago, that one of the developers actually lives right next to the property, or has land there, I should say. And he named these roads after his kids. And I think that says something for the quality that he wants to put into this. So our town board, was 5 of us, and they're really good people and proud to serve with them. We all gave this a lot of thought. This was not taken lightly, and it was approved unanimously. And we feel confident that it's going to be a good thing for the town. It's a type of development that is very popular around. It's different than what things were 20 years ago. So if anybody has questions more, I certainly can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Okay. Was Paul supposed to speak before?
And I apologize, Supervisor Eisen, I understood it was more of a clarification. Was I incorrect on that?
I have another question.
Okay, please go ahead, and then we'll do Supervisor Powers.
Will these homeowners in the subdivision be required to have flood insurance to get their mortgage?
Vice Chair, I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan to answer that question.
I'm not sure, Paul, but I do not believe, I'm not sure, but I do not believe that they'll have to have flood insurance where they're located.
To favorably consider this ordinance change until that question can be answered. As a resident on the north shore of Lake Winnebago, in order to get a mortgage, I was required, whether I wanted it or not, to have flood insurance. These folks are in a jurisdiction that's under the county board supervision because they're in a floodplain. I'm not prepared to favorably treat this resolution until that question can be answered.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had two concerns. One, with the possibility of building larger buildings with a bigger footprint for multiple families, that lays down more concrete, which means nothing for water to sink into. I know my father has owned his home for 64 years, and it was at the year about that he'd had it for 60 years before he decided to pave his driveway, because there is a difference in what happens with a paved area and an unpaved area, and how water is retained and goes into the ground or runs off. And he doesn't live anywhere near a lake, but this is near Lake Butamore, and be more runoff. That was my one concern, that a bigger cement footprint will mean less water being absorbed into the ground. The second thing is that when we had the plea from the mother whose young daughter was killed at Highway A in Oakwood and Neenah, that we all kind of talked about that if the next time that something came up where we were going to have a large number of homes and the zoning all changed, that we would expect that there would be something that the builder, the developer, would have to be responsible for roads. And whether it's older people living in a place, I'm an older person, but I have two jobs. I'm out in the daytime. Not everybody who's older has stopped working and has no place to go. So if we're going to put that many more homes in, the developer should be responsible for seeing to it that the roads are going to manage that. We talked about that with the little girl after the little girl was killed up in Neenah. So I don't know why we're going to back down now and say, oh, well, in this case, we don't have to worry about the developer figuring out how traffic patterns are going to be. We'll just let him go ahead and build it. Those are my two concerns. The traffic pattern, it's not our responsibility. I think it's the developers, and the additional of concrete footprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Deffernan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question will be to Supervisor Rasmussen, and I'm looking at this from a procedural issue. Based on the testimony tonight from the audience, there was 250 signatures submitted to the town. I assume they were submitted to the town clerk? Is that correct?
Please, Supervisor Rasmussen.
That was the petition I was talking about for apartments and R1. It's not applicable here.
I didn't hear his answer, sir.
Please.
That was the petition that I referred to. The petition was for no apartments and to be zoned R1. There are no apartments in this plan, and R1 is not applicable.
I'm going to refer to, if the board receives a petition specific to a zoning change, then you as chairman and the board have to determine whether or not it requires a 3/4 vote. Did you do that, sir? if you have a petition opposing the zoning changes, state law is very clear, you have to address that. Did you do that, and did you determine a 3/4 vote of the body was required?
Our vote was unanimous.
So you did determine a 3/4 vote was required? Did you address that petition? is what I'm saying?
I don't recall that, but our vote was unanimous.
I think what you're saying then is that even if you had required a 3/4 vote, it would have been exceeded that vote criteria, correct? I'm just.
I don't know what more I can say.
Well, I think perhaps you could say, yes, we did address that statutory provision, and it did require a 3/4 vote, and we did meet that requirement. Is that how I'm interpreting your answer?
We did a lot of things. I don't recall exactly that. Had I known we were getting this deep into it, I would have made sure our town attorney was here. So we're getting a little deep here.
Okay, I'll take that then. If it was a unanimous vote, and you have a 5-member board, correct? That's correct. My second question deals with the concerns that have been raised about impervious surface, about a retention pond for this large area of property. As I'm looking at this map, which is very hard to read, I might add, because it's quite small, I only see one area, one retention pond, and that would be in the center of the page on the bottom. Is that correct?
No, that's the park. The big retention pond is outlot 2, over towards the right side of it, and then I believe it's outlot directly north of there, outlot 1. You see along the edge, that's the other those are for retention and water quality.
Well, outlot 2 seems quite adequate in size based on the map here. And then you have another retention pond, outlot 1. Let me find that. Can you tell me where that is here? Would that be in the lower left corner?
It's directly straight up from
Okay.
Outlot 2.
So they have one large one, and then they have one small one on the, I assume, other side of the road. I don't know if that's northwest or north? Okay. And do you happen to have the square footage of the outlots, or of the retention ponds?
I do not have that with me, no.
And were they engineered? That's all the questions I have. I think for those who have raised concerns about water quality, if retention ponds of that size should adequately address that concern. Well, I guess that's all I have to say. It appears to be sufficient on its face, as long as it's engineered.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Wingrid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to echo that the retention ponds that they have for this greatly exceeded the county ordinances, and this was all taken into consideration. And it's a valid concern that that impervious surfaces can create further runoff, and therefore, they had to make some sort of retention ponds to reflect that. They greatly exceeded these requirements according to the Planning and Zoning Department of Winnebago County. So I just wanted to emphasize on that this is all taken into consideration. Furthermore, this kind of ties into what we will be talking about tomorrow. We're going to be having a public hearing tomorrow in regards to floodplain, changing the floodplains within Winnebago County at 6:30. I do recommend everyone to come in regards to that. But as far as I know, this was not considered to be a floodplain. This was it was not informed to me that any of this was going to be considered to be a floodplain or a risk of flooding, a high risk of flooding. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingrid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've never been really good at math, but I remember from 5th grade the nun teaching us fractions. Am I not correct? 3/4 is even better than 4/4, or is it 4/4, is better than 3/4, so I guess that's pretty good evidence in favor of this. We've had many experts look at this, both at the county level and at the town level. If there is an expert in the room on this, it's Joel. He lives there, he's worked there, he understands the government in and out. This is a well-thought-out proposal. Obviously, it doesn't appeal to some of the neighbors, but I agree with him over the years on this board and just watching even city politics. There's a lot of NIMBY going on here tonight, so, you know. And also, I took the chance of going out and actually looking at this. I think you can understand these issues much better if you look at it, and instead of having Superman's vision to read this map here. If you can read the name of a kid on this map, I applaud you.
Casey May.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and go to a vote. We will do a roll call vote for this. Please, go right ahead then, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Testing, there it is. Okay, on the flood insurance, I'm not real sure on this, but I know it's not.
No? Let me try one thing here.
There we go.
Good.
It's not a floodplain there, and so I don't believe that flood insurance is applicable, but I just really can't answer that. It was brought up about the duplexes with more impervious surface. Actually, if those are two-family, if those two-family were split in bigger homes, there would be more impervious. So this is actually less by having that. And then on the question about the roads, the developer is building the roads in that development. The intersection that I was referring to is not, it's near there. They exit there onto 21 to get out of there, but it's not in the general area, and that certainly is not the responsibility of the developer. That's the responsibility of the DOT. I think I answered them. I would request a roll call vote on this.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. I see one other call-in, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joel, just one thing, or I'm supposed to direct this to the chair. Two-family places might take up less of a footprint, but they're not going to be sitting on two full lots of land. Isn't that correct?
I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Well, the lot sizes are bigger because of that, and that R3 zoning means they can put duplexes there, but they can put single-family homes there also, so they're, I don't know what his intention is, the duplexes, I believe, but it could be the other way too. But there's not much difference there as far as impervious, and that's all taken into the engineering for the retention.
I'm not sure I'm convinced, but thank you, sir.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen, for your comments, and thank you, Supervisor Powers. I'll call on Supervisor Gordon.
And she's back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Supervisor Rasmussen just said that it's not the responsibility of the developer to worry about, like, the intersection of Leonard Point Road and Highway 21. At what point does an increase in traffic volume, which in this case would be extreme, I think, if it's not the developer's responsibility, whose responsibility would it be? I mean, if they're going to contribute this many more cars to the traffic coming out of Leonard Point Road onto Highway 21, that would be a concern for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
I know I plowed snow out there for quite a few years, and you can take Old Armo Road down to Oakwood Road, and there's actually a stoplight there. So it's a very safe intersection. You don't have to go out on Leonard's and 21. If you feel that the traffic's too bad that day, just go down Old Armo Road, turn down Oakwood Road, and there's a traffic signal there, and you have no problem going through there. So I don't really think there would be a problem with the traffic.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll once again go to a vote. We'll do a roll call vote. So vote aye if you approve the ordinance change, and that would be rezoning to R2/R3. Vote nay if you don't. And that motion carries 27-4. So just for for those in the back of the room, that means we did approve the rezoning to R2/R3. So moving on down to the next item, which is a mandatory ordinance number 020419. Town of Clayton, on behalf of Daniel Schutt, rezoning to R1 Rural Residential District for tax parcel number 006-0817-06-01. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of a mandatory ordinance 020219 on behalf of the town of Clayton.
There's a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Then we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So moving on down to the final amendatory ordinance, and that is amendatory ordinance number 020319, Town of Clayton, on behalf of the Town of Clayton, rezoning to B3 General Business District for tax parcel numbers 006-0339 and 006-0339-01. I'll call on Supervisor Youngquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of amendatory ordinance number 020319.
There's a motion and a second for approval of mandatory ordinance number 020319. Any discussion? And we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes zoning reports and ordinances. So we'll move on down to resolutions and ordinances. And once we're completed with those, we'll do the presentations for this evening. So the first resolution is resolution number 106-022019, commendation for Margaret Rudin. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of Resolution 106-02-2019.
A motion and a second. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Margaret Rudin started working at Parkview Health Center as a casual call register nurse in March 1994 and became a regular full-time employee only a month later. Margaret, more affectionately known as Midge, was the heart and soul of the Prairie Side 1 unit at Parkview. She was the type of nurse every patient wanted to have. Her smile was contagious, and she was able to make even the grumpiest patients laugh. She was well loved by her coworkers, as she was very approachable and kept everyone smiling. For almost 25 years, Midge exemplified the finest qualities of a nurse at Parkview. She was always dedicated to her patients and hardworking and has a heart of gold. Midge retired on February 1 this year and is sorely missed.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. So there was a motion and a second, so we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution, which is resolution number 107-022019. Authorize the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department to accept 2 separate grants from the Homeland Security Alert Program, totaling $35,000, and appropriate the funds to equipment and small equipment expense accounts. I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of Resolution 107-2019, which authorizes the sheriff to accept 2 grants totaling $35,000.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Then we'll do this by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution, which is amended resolution number 108-022019. Authorize the Winnebago County Highway Department to accept additional funding from the state of Wisconsin and the county of Waupaca totaling $322,924 and appropriate the funds to 2018 capital project expense accounts. I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 108-02-2019. Authorize the Winnebago County Highway Department to accept the additional funding from the state of Wisconsin and the county of Waupaca totaling $322,924 and appropriate the funds to the 2018 capital project expense accounts.
There was a motion and a second. Any discussion? Then we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Moving on down to the next resolution, which is resolution number 109-022019. Authorize Winnebago County to apply for funds for maintenance of Winnebago County-owned and leased snowmobile trails. I'll call on Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution 109-022019. Second.
There was a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Then we'll do it by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution, which is ordinance number 110-022019. Amend section 19.24, parent 7 of the General Code of Winnebago County, Sunnyview Exposition Center rental fee schedule for 2021 to 2025. I'll call on Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of ordinance 110-022019.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the final resolution, which is resolution number 111-022019. Approve Asylum Bay Access Site 5-year lease agreement. I once again call on Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution 111-022019. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please, go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Parliamentary question. Why, and correct me, or remind me, why does it take 2/3 vote to pass this?
I suspect it's because it's a lease agreement, but I'll call on the Corporation Counsel to clarify.
I forgot.
I believe it's because it's a lease agreement, but I may be wrong.
It is a lease agreement, and as a result, it would be 2/3 of membership.
No matter what, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel, and thank you, Supervisor Norton. I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a note here, I'm noticing that multiple resolutions do not have the committee vote on that, on these resolutions. I would look forward to that being corrected in the future.
Thank you for pointing that out. We'll correct that in the future. Just for clarification, it passed the committee 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Seeing no other call-ins, well, once again, we did have a motion in a second, so we'll do it by voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes our resolutions and ordinances, and by our amended agenda tonight, that takes us to the presentations. Our first presentation on the new diversion program, that will be deferred, and that's simply because of timing conflicts, so the Corporation Counsel, the District Attorney did have to leave, so we will plan on putting him on a future agenda, possibly the March 19th agenda, obviously pending his availability. So we'll move to what you would see on the agenda as the second presentation, which is the funding request to address the soccer complex, road lighting replacement, and new parking lot lighting installation by our Parks Director, Rob Way, and that would be followed as well by the funding request to address replacement of 5-yard dump slash plow truck with attachments, also by our Parks Director. So please, Director Way.
So just
to make certain everybody has two handouts for these two presentations. One should be the would be the soccer complex, the replacement of lights, and then a second handout that looks just like it, which is the truck replacement. If not, Tom is up here to provide them. Looks like everybody has it. All right. So to start with, this is a funding request that would address the replacement of the soccer complex lighting in the community park. Also the installation of new lighting in the parking lots. It's a funding request of $269,000. And I'd like to start out just by mentioning the soccer complex itself, just so you get a fix on it. I want to give a few characteristics about what it consists of. So if you go to page 3 of your handout, and that is the map, you recognize the community park, and on the bottom of it, you'll see the blue box. Soccer complex consists of about 90 acres. In the community park, it has 18 soccer fields. You can see the road running through the middle of it, and if you look closely, that is some of the dots are the existing lighting. There's about 12 of those installed along the road. Just to give you an idea about the level of participation, the level of use that area of the park receives, we've done numbers that come out with about 250,000 visitors to the community park annually. And the soccer field itself, using the practices, the games tournaments, the Hmong festivals, we've come up with a number of about 100,000, or 40% of the usage in the community park directed at the soccer complex. So indeed, it makes it one of the highest use areas in the park itself. So as far as the history of the lighting systems in the community park, just real briefly, we've gone through about 3 transitions. The park being established in '68, it's about 50 years old. We just had that celebration. And the first lighting system, very brief. I have very little documentation on it, but it mounted to a globe system that was very decorative and so forth. For some reason, it was done away with fairly quickly. In mid-'70s, we put in, or what was put in was the light you see on, if you'll go to page 4. At the top of that page, it depicts the lighting system that was in the north section of the park and is currently in the soccer complex area. So that is the existing lighting. The rest of it to the north is the new LED lighting, about 2/3 of the park. So, and of course, the third transition is the LED lighting. And why we went with that in 2015, if you recall, is when the park was, that northern 2/3 was redone. The road system was done in a 2-way system, and a shared use path was installed. And part of that project also included the rehab or complete entire replacement of the lighting system in its entirety. So what you have in there, if you again look at page 4, that is the LED lighting that is currently in place on the northern section of the park. Why we went with LED lighting, number of reasons. The opportunity was there with this replacement. It already was an old system that was starting to fail. The underground wiring, which is direct burial, outside conduit, was prone to breaking. The poles themselves were old, aging. It's a fiberglass pole that we utilize, 7 inches diameter on the bottom, tapering to a lamp on top. Those have started to fray, and we are having a safety issue out there. They have been known to break in high winds. And I'll get back to that in a second to describe those further, why we replaced it. We also have a reason for going with LEDs because the park itself has transitioned into a much higher use through the years. My understanding was it was kind of discovered as Oshkosh used to move out there, and now we have residential almost entirely on the west side. There's some vacant lots in there, but pretty soon we're going to have that whole west side of the park covered with residential, and the LED does offer, reduces that ambient light that you would carry with a less efficient system. So we're concerned with, we were concerned with what we would offer for our nearby residents. And this LED lighting, you'll notice, is much lower in the park as opposed to the bright lights we used to have with that old system. So the makeup of our current lighting system, I need to describe this again. I mentioned the fiberglass poles, which are a big safety concern for us. As a matter of fact, if you look at page 4 again, you'll see that one tilting. It tilts in part because they were direct burial. They're not contained in cement. That does not offer well when you have high winds. They're starting to fail. We've often gone out there and tried to tip them, and I have the assistant parks director up here too, who has described instances where they're very fragile now, where even pushing them back or trying to correct them offers a chance that they might break off. We have a system that, as far as the old system, that is still in place, again, in the soccer complex, where it is direct burial. It is not in conduit as the upper portion of the park is now. We've had breaks down in that system for ages. Now I think with the frost not going as deep in the last few years, we haven't had that, but I'm afraid what this year is going to bring. Those systems still have that mercury vapor bulb, and if you're familiar with that Energy Act that overhauled, the light bulbs for the country, literally in '05, the Energy Act that did away with mercury vapor. And I think the last of it's being phased out was done in a phase effect, so those bulbs and those ballasts are pretty soon not going to be available, even in stock. We're finding that we're running out of what we do have for our poles, for our lamps, and so forth. And speaking of the lamp, if you again refer to page 4, that is a lamp that is deteriorating as far as the lenses. They're discolored, all of them. And anymore, they're not functional as far as maintenance either. When you're trying to take them apart, it takes time, and they're more likely to break now as they get more frail. So the new system that we're talking about would offer the same advantages we're already experiencing in the north half of the park. And I'll start out with the energy efficiency with these LED bulbs. We've done the numbers on them, and we come back that our energy cost in the park is at the 2/3 that has been replaced, has been cut in half. Used to spend about $9,500 per year in the park in that north end, those circuits on the north end. Now it's down to about $4,800. As far as safety, these LED bulbs offer more directional lighting. Again, I mentioned these lamps that we currently have. They're dispersed lights. They're not directional. They just pan out over the ground. These LED bulbs direct it more towards the parking lots, the shared use path, and we want that down in the south end as well. That obviously increases the safety, and that is a concern out there. You get away from the bulb, from the lights that are down there, you quickly go into darkness. These LED lights definitely light up a larger area with more intense light, not the soft light that you get with the mercury vapor. Our maintenance costs, we're looking to lower those. These bulbs, as far as the LED, are stated to not need maintenance for 7 years. They're much easier as far as cost goes for maintaining. You simply replace the panel instead of having to get into the lamps themselves. And also, I do want to underscore what we've done out in the park. We've attempted to attract more people out there, particularly with the shared use paths. We've had remarks from people who do transition from one end to the other, and they do compliment us on what we've done with the lighting with the LED lights. They literally say they feel more secure with that. So in wrapping up, just to describe the project, what it consists of, that's on page 5. Again, this project was estimated to run $269,000. That would be the funding request. And that would address the engineering. It would cover the placement of 19 of the lamps that are out there with new fixtures, and 14 new lamps. We would replace the light fixtures that are along the road and then place up to 14 new lamps in parking lots that are not currently lit, 4 of them. Would also install paneling, or the panel, transformer, and in-ground wiring in conduit, and would also address the landscaping restoration. As far as the project goes, we're looking to engage it in fall, hopefully if everything went well. So the project could be done yet this year, and without disruption to programming. So at this time, I'll take any questions on this project.
Thank you, Director Way. I see one call in here, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I actually don't have any questions, although I will comment. I think the proposal is quite adequate, if not overdue. Thank you.
It is.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Borchert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Have you considered solar lighting? Was that part of your consideration?
We looked at it. There are options, even with this model, that, I don't know if you can retrofit it, but the cost was somewhat prohibitive for it.
Okay. And then the second question, I'm a little confused. Are you, this is budgeted for 2008, or 2019 budget?
No, it would
Capital?
come in as a bonding, part of the bonding request.
Did we
Bond-
approve it as
no,
part
Vicki
of
could
the
probably- go ahead.
2019 budget?
I can answer that. Our current process is we come before you with a 5-year capital improvement
Right.
plan. So I did present those to you, I believe, in January.
Yep.
Those do not get approved by the board. That shows you what we're thinking of doing for 2019 through 2023. Then the directors have to come before you with their project and go over the project and have a presentation. After this, he'll come before the Personnel and Finance Committee to ask for the actual funds.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to the board for you to appropriate the funds. That is our current capital
Okay.
project
So this was,
process.
this is on the priority list for capital expenditures for
It
this
is,
year?
it is, and I will
Okay.
show that when we do the budget
Great.
transfer, and we show that we're going to bond for the whole 269,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker, Supervisor Borchert, followed by Supervisor Weiss.
Thank you. I think my mic does work, doesn't it? This will be the first time I've talked, so I apologize. Have you looked into leasing lights at all from the local utility?
We do that in some instances. We find that it comes out, we're paying more in that instance. Obviously, I've not been able to do an ROI on this. It does extend out quite a bit because we are going with LED lighting, which is more expensive, but I believe if we went the leasing route, it would come out much higher than what we would pay for if we just installed it ourselves. So we do leasing in some instances. I don't think it's for our smaller areas.
If you could explore that, I work at the utility, and it would be a good comparison to bring up for the board to show what it is, because if you lease, then you don't have any maintenance costs.
I don't know that they offer LED lighting. I've not looked into it. I know they'll do, we usually do it just as a light here or a set of lights there. I've never looked at it wholesale.
Like everything else, it's changing so fast. What they didn't last week, they might this week. So just, if you get a chance next time, run it past the
You
utility
bet.
and
I'll
just
be in front of you again.
see
Yeah.
if it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Borchert. Next speaker, Supervisor Weiss, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, I'm just questioning about, first of all, thank you for putting the LED in. I applaud you for that. That is a very good choice on that. Get rid of those mercury lights there.
Yeah.
Second thing, I also applaud you for using the LED because of, in Fox Crossing, we have some dark sky initiatives. And the LED is going to put it right down onto the soccer fields, and that's also good. The question about the utilities, I would stay away from that myself too. We're looking at that also in Fox Crossing, getting rid of the utilities because we don't have any more control over it, and all of a sudden they come out with LEDs or something else down the road, and we're still paying for it. So that's good. The last thing on this is the panel. I'm not sure what all is entailed with the panel. Is this going to be something that's going to be regulated for when there are events, or is it just on and off dawn to dusk or something like that?
Well, I can let Tom address this. I kind of put him in charge of the regulating of the lights. If Tom, if you wanted to come up and.
With the lighting schedule, it'll be similar to the rest of the park. During the open parts of the park, it'll be, as the police requested, it will be from dusk to dawn. And then on the off-season, when the soccer fields are not used, that part of the park is closed down. So for 4 months out of the year, we would just have very limited lighting just for like, so the police can look in and make sure nobody's tearing up the fields or something. But other than that, it will be from dusk to dawn.
Do you need all of the lights for that? For
No,
the
we could.
police to look at?
We could do like we do in the rest of the park. They're staged on different circuits, and we could set different timers for those, and some of them will just come on with the, obviously with the sun cycles. So,
Excellent. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Supervisor Weiss. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender.
I would think they also pose a liability issue. If you go out there and look at them, some of them are probably leaning 35, 40%. And the one right across from the shelter where, you know, we'll be building that shelter looks like it's ready to fall over any windstorm, you know, and you could have people walking by, you could have cars parked there. I live out there and I walk through that park. I don't think I've ever seen them all working. Sometimes there's none working. We had a truck run through one of the soccer fields last fall, and we actually got him on the camera, but the lighting's so dim, we couldn't get the license plate. So I think it's an advantage to get that where basically when the police do patrol it, the parking lots are better lit, you know, you can actually see what's happening in there. So I think as far as a liability issue, it's something we should really address.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll go ahead and move on to the next parks presentation in regards to the replacement of the 5-yard dump and plow truck. Please, Director Wade.
Thank you. And again, this is the second handout you have. All right. Just to point out that the picture of the current truck is on the second page. What my presentation, very brief, mostly addresses the narrative on the first page. Kind of speaks for itself. It's a 97 truck. It's 5-yard, 4x2. And we purchased it 12 years old in '09. It was already 12 years of service on it from the Highway Department. Right away, we had planned on putting funding into it to bring it up to snuff. It was totally repainted, addressed some of the rust on it. Also, the attachments were marginal at that time. We could get by with what we had, and we did. We have for a long time as far as the attachments go. But you can see quickly after that in 2012, referring to the $17,500 that we have since stuck into it, and you can add another $2,000 to that since this was written up in December. So that funding or that repair cost is not going down, and we'd anticipated that it is only going to go higher much quicker. So why does the Parks Department have a 5-yard truck? Well, simply back in '09, for all those years prior to '09, we'd been using our half-ton or three-quarter-ton trucks to remove our snow, and our 1-ton truck for hauling. It proved to be quite expensive as far as the repair costs go. We have responsibilities for the Coughlin Building, the Expo Center, the Community Park, and various and a sundry of other properties out there that we also plow. And we found that up until '09, we were spending an exorbitant amount of money repairing these lighter weight vehicles. These vehicles aren't really meant to be pushing the type of snow that we encounter over at the Expo or the Coughlin Building for that matter. So we did it as a matter of cost. We also were doing it because the quickness at which this heavier 5-yard truck can plow. That's important because the Expo in particular, you couldn't sit there for 2 days pushing and pushing with these lighter vehicles. Plus, we could never get the snow back far enough. So that's why we have a 5-yard truck. It's important to us. If we had to go back, I think we'd start experiencing the same problems, and I think our efficiencies at the Expo in particular and the Coughlin Building would go down significantly for our abilities. So what we're looking to do is purchase again, a 4x2 5-yard truck for $120,000, and the attachments replace what we have. They are worn and becoming even a safety concern at this point. Replace it. We need a plow, front-mounted wing, stainless steel box, and a salter as well for $105,000. Total of a funding request of $225,000. And I'll take questions.
Thank you, Director Wade. First speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, will there be any possibility that our beautiful 1997 International muscle truck would be able to be sold to anybody? I mean, what's your plan to do with the truck? Our
Yeah,
beautiful
well,
97.
number one, we haven't got tight plans on that yet. First, you need to fund it, because we weren't looking to get rid of it unless we did not receive funding. So right now, what I've looked out on the market with the attachments, between 15 and 20,000 possibly.
Okay.
I guess we would take it as this funding becomes available, and at that time, we would commit to probably auctioning it off.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Lautenschlager, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Rob, my question for you is, if we don't replace this truck, and this truck goes down sometimes, who's gonna do our plowing?
Yeah, well, we would rely on highway, and I think right now they probably have enough to do, and I think I would go back to what I mentioned. You know, we're a priority to ourselves, but obviously there are greater needs out on the roads and so forth, so we kind of would play second fiddle, and it would jeopardize our efficiencies. We do have programming at the Expo. Coghlan Building opens up no matter what the weather, so those would probably suffer.
So basically, it's a truck we can't do without.
Correct.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, do you recall what you paid for that truck back in?
Oh, I don't. I wish I'd brought it in, but I'm gonna, off the top of my head, go at about 12,000, I think. We got it at a real good price, if I
And
recall.
I recall some of those transactions. This
Yeah.
was after I left the department.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if, because there's a lot of turnover for vehicles at the highway department, if there's another one that is in pretty good shape.
Checked into it. Yeah, nothing's gonna be going, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Doug said for several years yet.
3 to 5 years, there's nothing in the hopper that would be available from highway.
Okay, I know there's not a lot of 5-yard trucks there. I just wondered
Right.
if there would be that option again, so that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's your evaluation as to why the equipment can't be used on the new truck, i.e. the front plow on the wing? Why that can't be adapted to?
All right, I'm gonna let Tom go on that one.
Okay.
It is wear and tear, but he can be more specific on it.
The thing with the plow and all the attachments on it, first of all, most of it's obsolete, and the highway department has struggles to even get parts for them. The metal fatigue alone on the plows, we had one in there today that we had to, or just this last Friday, we had to get welded. And we welded next to cracks that were welded next to cracks, which are welded next to cracks. So the metal fatigue on these plows and the mounts are really bad. And then it's just, the plows are just as old as the truck. Sure, they work, but we spend more time at the highway department than some of the highway guys, you know, with our equipment. So we're becoming a little too friendly to them, and I think our welcome's being worn out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, I have a question on that. What will you be doing with the truck besides plowing snow? Will you be doing anything with it?
We do haul with it. We have it kind of is on an as-needed basis as far as the soils, and we're going to be doing quite a bit of that with the new property that we've acquired at the Expo. So we anticipate probably bumping up its use quite a bit, particularly this summer with hauling.
So rather than just a snowplow, it'll be an all-around truck, you might as well
Correct.
say.
Correct. Otherwise, we're dependent on a 1-ton truck. Carrying chips up the trail with a 1-ton is considerably less than what it takes with a 5-yard going up the trail.
Okay, because I was just going to say, if you're just going to plow snow, and I shouldn't say just for Ray sitting back there, especially right now, but I would think, according to Larry there, I think there are times it could be plowed by like the highway or whatever.
Yeah,
I think we got to start working more as a county together, rather than this one needs this and this one needs that. But if you're going to use it as an all-around truck, I can understand.
We do. I'm neglecting the warm weather usage, which is considerable, but admittedly, this winter, it's been out a heck of a lot more than usual.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. I see one other call in, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, have you looked at purchasing a used vehicle from other counties at all? Is that an option?
Not other counties, we could investigate it, but again, we're looking at the reliability factor too. If we're likely to get it from another county, they've done probably what the highway department did. At 12 years, it's going to go out, and we're going to have to stick a considerable amount of money into it again. Parks is notorious for making use of our vehicles probably longer than that typical 12-year threshold. And I would anticipate doing that with this one as usual, so we'd like to start out with a new vehicle, good, reliable attachments. Plus, if it goes out, Tom was referring to its being outmoded and so forth, we prefer to kind of have that in hand for the highway department in particular, because if it does go in for repairs, it can be done quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
I'd just like to say, normally when a highway department gets rid of a truck, they deem it unreliable. You know, like, that was actually, I plowed snow with that truck, and even after this truck, I had one other truck. So this truck was deemed unreliable, one truck before that. They made this truck last all those years. Like that plow hitch on there, you have to actually put grease on the side of there because the plow will basically stick. The new ones, basically, you don't have to do that. So then that grease, when you travel on the road, it gets up on the windshield. And then you turn your windshield wipers on, and then the grease goes all over your window. The push bars on that, it never really lined up really very, you know, they'd always bend. You would basically, they're supposed to be straight, and for some reason, they never were when it came. So the push bars bent quite frequently on that truck. So, you know, it's a good piece of equipment to get rid of, and the Parks only has one 5-yard truck. They have no backup. You know, the highway department, and when I was there, had 33 trucks with Sanders. So if one broke down, somebody else just took part of your section, where they have one vehicle, so it's pretty much essential they have something that's reliable. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. This personal testimonial is quite helpful. Next speaker, Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Rob, if the intent is to buy a new vehicle, is there any advantage to the county to get it through the highway department? Such as maybe getting a state rate or something?
Oh, yeah, well, that's going to be investigated. That's typically how it would go, that route. We involve the highway department in these purchases. We've conferred with them. We might do it on our own, but it's not going to be without their input. Because we'd like to, again, I'll go back to the fixing of the truck. We don't want to get something that's not going to be in sync with what they are familiar with. So that, as far as working off the state rate, yeah, that's going to be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude that presentation. Thank you very much, Director Wynn,
Thank you.
for both presentations. Okay, we have one other final presentation tonight. That's a presentation on the 2019 highway projects by our Highway Commissioner, Ray Polonen. You have the floor.
Thank you, thank you. I would add, Rob, we do have a slightly barbecued truck for your purchase if you'd like to buy one. Might need a little work, though. Pardon? We suspect that the after-treatment system, which is a fuel line that supplies diesel fuel to the exhaust system for the emissions control, cracked or developed a hole and was pumping fuel onto the exhaust manifold and eventually started on fire. So that's what we think happened. Well, thank you for allowing me to be your last presentation tonight. I'll be brief. I handed out or put a copy of my handout in front of you. I guess my intention was to just go through each project individually, just talk about what we're going to do, we're planning to do, and just open it up for questions at the end. There's actually 2 pages. There's the highway projects that are listed in our capital plan for this year. And then the second page is the parking lot work that is planned for this year as well. So getting started, County Highway A is our first project. That project, as you know, has been in the pipeline for quite some time. The design has been ongoing. This year, the work planned on County A is the continuation of the design, hopefully finalizing that this year, But we do need to start purchasing right-of-way for the project. So that's what is being funded for this year, the $420,000. That project is from from Indian Point Road to County Highway Double G. If you recall, that's a state federally funded project. The state awards us 80% of the funds for the construction of the roadway, or reconstruction of the roadway. And essentially, they manage the project from start to finish. When the project is over, then they turn it back over to the county. County Highway CB and Oak Ridge Road Roundabout, another project that you're all very familiar with. We're actually at the point of construction this year. The project will be in the state bid letting, I believe in March, and will be reconstructed this year. I do want to bring to your attention, talking to the design firm working on the design, when the original estimate, when the original application was made for the funding, state average prices have gone up significantly since then. So I may be talking to you at some point, depending on what the bids come in. We don't know for sure at this point if this is going to be adequate funding to cover the cost of the project. But for now, that's the best information we have. County Highway CB, Shady Lane to County Highway BB. This is the widening of County Highway CB to 4 lanes. Last year, if you recall, a roundabout was constructed in front of Secura Insurance Company, their new corporate office. So this will be the widening of that roadway through that segment of County Highway. That's been planned for some time. In fact, when County Highway CB was initially constructed, the subgrade was constructed to accept the wider road. So that's actually, the commissioner and the highway committee back then were really thinking ahead and have now been able to save us a significant amount of money because the majority of the grading is already done. So kudos to them. Along with that is our County Highway CB bridge widening. In that segment of roadway, there's a bridge over a tributary that will need to be widened to accommodate the 4-lane extension or widening project. Paving project, County Highway K from Clairville Road to State Highway 116. That's one of our pavement maintenance projects. What we intend to do on this segment of highway is pulverize the existing asphalt, regrade it, and repave it. There will be some ditching that needs to take place, some tree and brush cutting. There's some culverts that'll have to be replaced. A typical type paving project that you see in the county. This will complete the County Highway K corridor. If you recall, last year we repaved the segment from 116 to State Highway 21. So this will take it from 116 into the city of Oshkosh's city limits. And then the final project listed is County Highway Double F from State Highway 44 to 91. This segment of highway is in poor condition too. We've had to do continuous spot patching and repairs out there. There's a lot of truck traffic through there that I don't believe the asphalt section is adequate for the use that's there. So we intend to pulverize and add some gravel where needed. A lot of the base repairs have been done already, just out of need. So there will be also some ditch work, and there will be some significant brush and tree cutting along there as well. There's a lot of trees and brush growing in the right-of-way that need to be removed, and then will also be some culvert replacements. Total cost of the projects, $6.9 million. We are receiving $1.742 million in outside funding, so a total bonding of $5.158. So with that, if you want to look at the second page of your handout, we have Butler Avenue and the Parks Department parking areas. A total of $400,000 of parking lot maintenance. We're intending to profile, mill, and overlay Butler Avenue, which is the segment of roadway that connects to County A. If you're familiar with the Parkview Health Center, it'd be along the north side of the Parkview Health Center. It connects to County Highway A. There's a park area, that the roadway travels through, and then it turns the corner and goes up towards the Coughlin Center. Also, with this, we need to do some pavement overlays, milling and overlay work around the Parks Carpenter Shop area. The parking lot area over there is in terrible condition and needs to be upgraded. So with that, I guess I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments for the Highway Commissioner? I'll call on Supervisor Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray, just a couple questions on the CB project from Shady Lane up to Prospect. Is that going to start this spring?
Yes.
Spring, and will it be completed, both of them?
Yes, both projects will be completed this summer, yes.
Okay. All right. I guess the second thing is, have roundabouts been considered for either side of Shady Lane and for Prospect too at the same time?
Not at Shady Lane. That is a signalized intersection currently, and so is County Highway BB. I did talk to Dean Steingraber, the commissioner from Outagamie County, and we both agreed that at the time, that intersection was recently reconstructed with signals added. So at the time they decide to widen their section north of CB, then we'll look at that intersection again and decide if that would be an adequate or an appropriate application.
Good. There's quite a hump there coming down from the airport down to Shady Lane. I hope that that's addressed by somebody along the way there when you come down and you hit Prospect.
Yeah, I
go airborne a little bit.
Certainly know what you're talking about there, yeah.
So, okay. Is Outagamie County have that in their plans yet as to when that's going to happen?
I believe it's in their 5-year capital plan out towards the end, maybe year 5, if I recall.
Okay, would have been nice if we could do it all at the same time.
Yeah, the timing didn't work out. Okay. It did work out very nice for us to having that roundabout constructed in front of Secure Roundabout last summer.
Yeah.
Because that now will allow all that traffic to go one way or the other during construction, so that did work out very well for us.
That was good of them to put that in.
Yes, and by the way, the county didn't pay anything for that.
Yeah. No. Okay. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiss. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you refresh our memory on the timing of the Oak Ridge roundabout?
I think the state bid letting is in March, coming up in March or April. And then construction will begin in the spring, probably May or June.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Singstock, followed by Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 comments. Number one, this cost of this County A from Indian Point to Double G. I don't know, I drive back and forth on A quite often. I don't know unless my car rides better than most cars. I don't have any trouble with that road at all, especially at cost here over $4 million. How long is that? I think when you talked about that project once before, that's only about a mile, isn't it?
About a mile, yes, about a mile.
So when we get that done, we're gonna do another mile or another $4 million or something? We can keep doing it that way?
Well, as I mentioned, this is a state and federally funded project, so they're paying 80% of the cost.
Yeah, but that's
of it.
still taxpayer money.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah.
But yes.
Again, I don't know, I can't understand it. I mean, I drive it, I realize A is bad for bicyclists. I will not that. Okay, I won't talk about. Now, the other thing is what I'm concerned about, is where Double G enters A.
Right.
There's a curve to north of that. I came from Nino one night after having a meeting. I almost lost my life on that curve. I came around that curve, lucky I was only going 40 miles an hour. There was a semi across A, Broadway. I almost went underneath that trailer. So if down the road you're going to do any more construction, somehow I hope you can do something about that curve.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, that is something that needs to be addressed. And part of the problem there, too, is the brush along Senator Ellis's property on the right-of-way. That needs to be cleared to help visibility. One thing we are doing with this project to improve the safety of that area is we're relocating the connection of County Double G south about 1,000 feet. If you recall, County G connects right on the end of that curve, which is not a safe location. It's also on a skew. So County Double G will be, the intersection of G, Double G and A will be moved south about 1,000 feet and will connect to County A at a right angle. And that will dramatically increase the visibility of the traffic using County A and Double G at that location. So that will help tremendously.
Well, I know this, I would have been there 1 second sooner, my top of my car would have been sheared off.
Yep, I could definitely see where that would happen.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, the County Road K project, when is that projected to start?
We didn't put a schedule together yet, but I would anticipate that project would be in the July-August timeframe.
Okay, and then is there any talk about possibly changing the speed limit out there? Having a Y there, taking kids to school in the morning, that's a very, very busy intersection there on Clairville and K there. People are flying from, I would say, from the west coming into Oshkosh there. It's starting to be, like I said, a very dangerous intersection. Any talk about changing the speed limit possibly?
With all of our projects, we do look at the speed limits, and that would be an area that we would want to look at, definitely. Under state statute, we're governed on what we can do with speed limits. A lot of folks think that we can just post whatever speed limit we want, and we can't. We have to follow state statutes. But we can, by statute, without doing a speed study and an engineering analysis, reduce the speed from 55 to 45. So that is something that we may look at doing, leading up to that location that you're referring to, and that would make sense there in my mind, yes.
Yeah, I would say go out there tomorrow morning at about 7:45 in the morning. People are flying right through there.
Right.
So, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray, are any of these projects slated for, or could it have a bike and pedestrian plan, or is that too premature to even ask or inquire about?
Well, the County A project will have 5-foot paved shoulders, so it'll be adequate for bicycles, but not pedestrians. And the CB and Oak Ridge Road Roundabout project will have bicycle pedestrian accommodations. The others don't. I mean, the CB widening project, there's already a trail that's existing that'll remain.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll conclude that presentation. Thank you very much, Commissioner Pallone.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our agenda for this evening. Before we entertain a motion to adjourn, just wanted a little pre-planning for the future. May is coming up sooner than we think, so our county board tour, actually, believe it or not, is only 3 months away. So just a reminder to try to put it on your calendar for pre-planning. That would be Monday, May 20th. So that'd be the Monday immediately prior to our May 21st business meeting. So just wanted to kind of put in a reminder for that. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move we adjourn till March 5th.
Motion and a second, and just for clarification, that'll be March 19th, because we have canceled the March 5th one, so just for clarification, it would be till March 19th. Yes, except we did point out, and we provided an updated schedule to you previously, that the April meeting was April 16th instead of the 23rd. So I just, and you, correct? You're welcome. All right, there was a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.